Hello, everybody. I'm Joe McGovern, Awards Reporter here at TheWrap, and we are happy to have you here for our 2021-2022 award screening of Oscar Contenders Short Showcase with 6 short films today. And we are joined by their directors, Maria Brendle, the director of KACHUU, Victor Diaz Rodrigues, director of All Riders, Zamarin Wahdat, director of BAMBIRAK, Rongfei, the director of Girl with a Thermal Gun, Hsieh, director of Night Bus, and Gustavo Milan, director of Under the Heavens. We're going to show you the trailers for these 6 films, and then we'll get into a conversation with our panelists. But for the audience, please take part in the live chat of the stream, share your thoughts about the films, and let us know where you're tuning in from. And now let's look at the trailers for these films.
Çok oluşumuz gerek. Ansız болбойт.
Мені қой берші. Апа башқа мүмкіншілік болбай қалады да. Мен Бишкекке қой беріңізші.
Болдыч! Кичинекей айылдан чыкканыңа сүйүнүп жатсаң керек. Айылда эмне эчтеке жок. Бишкек сага буйруса жагат дебиш элем.
Саламатсыздар, келиңиз. Эмне аласыздар?
Менин üstümden аттап кетсең, өмүр бою жакшылык көрбөйсүң.
What does it mean to get around when you can't walk?
Able-bodied people never think that it's gonna happen to them.
Jail. This is jail. This is jail. Jail.
New York City Transit is the least accessible subway system in the entire United States. Only about a quarter of stations are accessible to people with disabilities.
It's time to recognize our civil rights, everyone's civil rights, to ride the friggin' subway. Malaysia Goodson fell down the stairs and died with her stroller.
Malaysia was an excellent mother. Just imagining as she was going down, what was going through her mind. Her birthday is coming up.
What do we want? Filmmakers! And when do we want them? Now!
Hey.
Wir müssen nach rechts.
It's okay.
Ich habe nicht gestohlen.
在新冠疫情特殊时期呢，我将会协助你完成每一单的配货，给你检测体温、洗手消毒，希望你能配合。
您的订单即将超时，请及时配送。
哎，紧起来啊！这是最后一班车啊！后面无车啦。
没关系，你先别哭哦。你有什么话你喝口水，你慢慢说。
¿Trabajo allá en Manao?
Yo voy a Sao Paulo. ¿Allá dónde hay trabajo?
Va a estar bien.
Welcome back. It is my pleasure to introduce Maria Brendle, Victor Diaz Rodrigues, Zamarin Wahdat, Rongfei Guo, Joe Hsieh, and Gustavo Milan. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us, and congratulations on all these incredible films. I loved watching them as one sort of big meal, because that way, even though they're obviously all separate films, they get to sort of be in conversation with each other, and you see a lot of the overlapping themes, and I want to talk to all of you about that. But to begin, I'd prefer to go around to everybody and ask about the inspirations in each case for why, what was the pull? Why did you have to make these films? And then we can see, the connections that we can draw. So perhaps we have 4 narrative films. We have 1 documentary short and 1 animated short. Let's start with Victor, who directed All Riders, which is a documentary.
Hi, Joe. Thank you so much for having me today, and it's a pleasure to meet all of you here. So All Riders is a documentary short on the battle for accessibility in the New York City subway, told by those fighting it. And for me, what drew me to this project was in late January of 2019, a young mother called Malaysia Goodson was carrying her 1-year-old daughter, Riley, in her stroller down subway stairs in Midtown Manhattan, and she fell and died, which was a really shocking event, which when I learned of it really kind of baffled me and made me want to understand how such a tragic event could take place. I mean, everyone who lives in New York or visits the city knows that the subway system is an integral part that makes the city tick, and that it's a very old system. In fact, it just celebrated its 117th birthday this October. So that was what made me want to understand, how can this happen? And then you understand that accessibility, for people who need stair-free access, the disabled, parents with strollers, or frankly, anyone who needs, an elevator, for example, that's what drew me to this story, was the death of this young mother who was 22 years old and was carrying her 1-year-old, baby in her stroller.
Yeah. And it's a wonderful portrait of her, and the film really is dedicated to her, which I think we all appreciate. Let me go to Joe. There are all these movies have a lot of really surprising twists and turns in the plot, but I don't think any of them have as many as Night Bus, which is your animated film. Where did it come from?
Oh, okay. The idea was coming from my travel, because I like travel, and I remember when I was driving along the coastal road in Taiwan, because Taiwan is an island, and I saw the moonlight and the large rocks and the sound of the wave give me a lot of inspiration for making this film. And I love this film is talking about love, talking about the secret, talking about the murder. So I think that's a perfect landscape for my film. And my film is some horror parts. So I think it's definitely a very great landscape. So I make this film. Yes, thank you.
Wonderful. I want to go to Maria. Like Victor, your film, which is a narrative, is dedicated to women who have been kidnapped and forced into marriages against their will. Thousands of women who this has happened to. So I guess obviously that's a real reason to make the movie. But what else? I guess just the same question. Why did it have to happen for you, this film?
Yeah, when I first heard about bride kidnapping and learned how often this happened, I really felt shocked. And I thought I have to do something. And as a filmmaker, of course, I can make movies and hopefully create awareness to the fate of these women, because it happens so often in Kyrgyzstan as well as in other countries in the world. And I wanted to tell these stories and give these women a voice with this film.
Thank you. Gustavo, do you want to chime in now and explain to us your film is it only has a few characters. It's a pretty tight and condensed time frame that it takes place in, but just tell us a little bit about it and what your inspiration was.
Yeah. So Under the Heavens tells the story of a young Venezuelan mother who is immigrating to Brazil. And the story, I think, comes from two major sources of inspiration for me. The first one is, of course, what's going on in Venezuela today. Nearly 6 million people have left the country over the past 5 years, and many of them went to Brazil. I'm from São Paulo, I'm from Brazil. And so that for me was, of course, a great source of inspiration for the story. But the second one, it's something more personal. It's something that happened in my family, because my mother breastfed my cousin. My aunt didn't have milk in the beginning, and so my mother helped her. And that created a very strong bond between my mother and my cousin. And for me, it blurred in a very beautiful way the boundaries of motherhood. And I always wanted to talk about that, but I didn't know exactly how to approach this story. And when I was doing some research trips close to the border from Brazil and Venezuela, I saw this story reflected in two women I met. I was visiting one of the refugee camps, and I met this woman who had recently got a job, but she didn't have the money to pay for childcare. She had a baby. So another woman was taking care of her baby while she was working. And that made me think of my story. And then I put everything together into the first draft of the script. So that's pretty much how the story came up.
Thank you. I was immensely moved by BAMBIRAK, the film. Similar to Gustavo, a film about motherhood, your film is sort of about fatherhood. A very sweet relationship between a father and a daughter. She's about 8 years old. It feels like a personal piece, but tell us, is that true? I mean, where within you did this film come from?
I mean, you are right. BAMBIRAK is a very personal piece, because the daughter's name is also Kati and my sister's name is Kati. And but for the sake of the movie, I had to change my father's name. And the story comes from a very personal experience of growing up in Germany as an Afghan immigrant back in the 90s. And I got it is strongly based on my memories, I must say. My father had to deliver packages because his diploma wasn't accepted. He was a university teacher in Kabul, but studied in Russia. And because of war, we had to flee. And in Germany, he couldn't get any job. And when he learned German, they didn't accept his diploma, so he started to deliver packages. And that, in combination with my experience 20 years later, going back to my hometown Germany and being being told that I'm a shit piece of Muslim in the subway, I realized for the first time, like I reflected for the first time, my two experiences of growing up in Germany and feeling that I belong as an 8-year-old, and coming back to Germany and experiencing that I don't belong after being away for a while. And reflecting back on my parents, especially on my father, who really struggled to fit into Germany, even though he tried, because of the system, because it just wasn't, it was two very different cultures, Germany and Afghan culture. First, it was the cultural clash, and second of all, it was just that he was 40 years, he was like doing something else, and then suddenly he had to start from zero. So the story comes from a very, very, very personal experiencing and realizing how traumatized my father was. And as an 8-year-old, you don't see that. He's just the strong dad who has a job and who gets angry and who does mistakes, like every father does. But so yeah, and that's how I put one and one together, and BAMBIRAK came out of it.
Thank you. It's like all of these movies, it's a very subtle way to touch upon these really big themes, you know, and we certainly appreciate that. And Rongfei, I think that audiences will be very entertained by what you have pulled off here. The thermal gun is the we've all seen it. It's the temperature check that we get when we go into stores since COVID. But you decided to make a romantic musical about the experience of getting your temperature checked at the market. So just tell us where, you know, same thing. Where did this come from? How did you go this direction with the idea?
Yeah, Girl with the Thermal Gun is a musical film with dance, and I came up with this idea, of course, during COVID, after I have been locked down for 1 month in my room. And then when I walk on the street and everything, this was last year, so everything like changed, like it's so surreal on the street, people wearing masks and keeping the social distance. And I can't believe this is the world we were in. So I feel, oh my gosh, it's so suppressed. I really want to burst into song and dance, even for just 1 minute. So I came up with the idea like, well, I think dance and music seems to be something that not realistic at that time. So what about I make a musical film that like happened during the COVID? So I came up with this idea that a delivery man like have a crush with the girl with the thermal gun who like test the temperature. And then I have this supermarket, because when I was walking on the supermarket in China, and I feel everyone wearing a mask is just like a ghost. And the supermarket is like a very good metaphor for a family. Like it has the baby stuff, it has the wine and the bed sheet. So I feel like maybe it's a good place to have the delivery man to have the crush with the girl, and it's a great place for dancing. And so I just want to make the film in the COVID that it's not gloomy, it's not a sad film. It's just want you to know that sometimes the dance and music can help, can make you feel better in this dark world.
It's very joyous, and there's even a moment in it when we see a box of hair care product. I think it's a hair dye, and the woman is wearing a face mask on the box, which is very cute. But so I wanted to use that as a way to ask all of you. I mean, I think these are all contemporary films. Yours, you would be the only one that actually directs, that addresses COVID in a really explicit way. And some of these were made before COVID, but still, these are all of them are tackling issues that we're dealing with now. So perhaps we can start and just open it up. Ask about the ways in which your creation of these films was how the modern world. Perhaps start with Joe, because I think you have the most unique take on the modern world with Night Bus. But explain to us how living in 2020 or 2021 shaped the making of that movie.
Actually, I think in this time, I make my movie more convenient because the animation technique, but I always draw in the past, the time past, a long time ago, at different kind of time of Taiwan, but there is one thing I want to show to the audience is the people's love, and so each of my film is talk about love. So this time the Night Bus also talk about love, the people's love and the animals' love. So yes, thank you.
Can you also tell us, for the people who will be seeing this and have not seen your other work, tell us some of the other titles we can look for of films you've made.
Yeah, sure. And I make the present. It talk about a girl. She was fall in love with a man, and she want to chasing him for her passion. And there's a horror movie too, also. And I have a film called Middays. It's to talk about a mother who sell her body to the soldier to change the meats, the human meats, to feeding her family. So all of my films talk about people struggling in a very difficult time, but they have a very strong mind, very strong heart and love. So also in the Night Bus, this is a secret in this trip, and this okay. I hope the audience can find out who is the guy. The guy have the love, strong love to struggle. Yes, thank you.
Well, I mean, I know even in Night Bus, there are things you hold back information so that we think that we're seeing one thing.
Yeah.
And actually something else is happening. So, of course, audiences love that type of storytelling.
So happy.
Thank you. I wanted to ask Maria to talk, similarly talk about the contemporary, this is an old story, but it's certainly one that we're still dealing with. And while you're talking about that, can you mention the lead actress, because she's wonderful?
Yeah, her name is Alina, and she's brilliant. So I made this casting in Kyrgyzstan. We had 3 days, and I saw 160 people in 3 days. And Alina was the second person who came to the casting, and she stayed with us all the 3 days because it was kind of love at first sight. It was clear to me she has to make this film with me and be this huge part of the film. And I made the casting almost one year before I could really make the film. So I was afraid she will not make it, or some person from her family will not allow her to make this film. But she was with me all the time, and I'm so thankful for her because she's a huge part of this film. Yeah.
Wonderful. On that idea of talking about casting, Gustavo, with your actress, boy, that her face is something to really behold in front of the camera lens. Can you tell us about her and what was it like working with her?
It was amazing to work with Samantha Castillo. She's a Venezuelan actress In fact, all of the cast in the movie comes from Venezuela, with the exception of the truck driver, who is a Brazilian actor. But I honestly have to say it was I think one of the most important moments for me during the process of making this movie. When I found Samantha Castillo, I saw a Venezuelan movie that she was the lead actress. It's called Pelo Malo. It's an amazing Venezuelan movie. And I just had goosebumps. I knew right away she would be perfect for the role. So I reached out to her, and she read the script. And when she said yes, for me, it was just like one of those moments, like you feel like your movie take another step. And I actually learned a lot about the character with Samantha, because she was dealing with a lot of the things that the movie is dealing with. You know, she was also immigrating to Mexico at the time that we were shooting the movie. She also had a baby. So a lot of the things that are happening with the character were also happening in the life of Samantha. And so she brought all of this to the set and to the movie. So yeah, it was just an amazing moment for me to work with her.
Mm. And so, Zamarin, I wanted to sort of also talk about the two actors, the little girl who's so great, and finding the two of them and kind of filming with them. You know, this was also sort of a film that's very tightly composed in terms of its time frame. It's all really a couple hours. Well, I mean, the film's 10 minutes long, but the time frame is a couple hours.
Yeah, exactly. So the little girl, to find her was for me the hardest, because I wanted to actually work with an Afghan girl. And it's very, very difficult to find an Afghan girl her age that the family is very open for her to, you know, act in your movie. So after looking at a lot of casting agency in Germany, where I realized there are just German kids, because I don't know, like immigrant parents don't put their kids into casting agencies. So most of them don't. It gets better, but so I went up this one day to my mom's training camp, and they're like she's just doing her fitness, but there's a Taekwondo school in the same house, and I saw this little girl just like running around, and when I saw her, I immediately felt that it was like kind of love on the first sight. I immediately felt it. That's her, you know, like Maria also said. And I started to chase her and find out, who is this little girl? Where's she from? And I found the teacher, and he introduced me to her. So I spent a lot of time just to pick her up after Taekwondo class, go with her to rehearsal room, and just have the camera with me and just like try different acting skills out. And the dad was really keen to help us. So that really, really helped to kind of foster the relationship and have her trust me. And yeah, and in the end, I ended up working with her because she was just the girl. I casted more and more, but no one felt right, even though she was a non-actor and it was her first role in the film. But she had because she's an athlete, she was training since she's 3 years old. So her attention span, she was so focused and had such a stamina. She never got tired. We were like, we're done for today. You're done. She's like, really? Can we not do one more take? And we're like, no, tomorrow. So it was really, really, I was very lucky with her, like to find her and to have her just listening to me as if I'm her coach. That was her training since 3 years old. And the dad, he's actually an actor. And I knew him from 10 years before when I did an internship at a TV channel in Germany, and I met him. And I always remembered him. So I just wrote to him if he would be up for casting, and he was. And somehow their chemistry worked perfectly for the film. And they became like this buddy road trip movie. people, and he's the opposite of my dad. He looked completely different. He was really warm, and but it kind of helped to shape the characters too. And she was the opposite of the character I wrote, so they both came with opposite characteristics, and I think they made the movie much better than it was in my mind.
Of course. And people ask, I'm sure all of you advice, but you know, internships do sometimes work out for the best. Even if it's 10 years later, you never know. Victor, I want to, you know, you made a documentary, so it's not so much an issue of casting, but you do, in a way, you do cast a documentary because you find the subjects that you're going to have on screen, and we see several here on camera. Tell us about finding the people that you have, including the gentleman who begins the film, who had an injury from a tree branch that fell on him.
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting question, Joe. You know, you're right. There's, unlike narrative, you don't really have like a casting process for actors, but you do, you know, pick your characters who are going to drive your narrative. And for my case, that really was a process of, you know, once after the accident with Miss Goodson happened, and I started researching heavily on, you know, the topic of accessibility and, you know, in the subway system in New York, and kind of understanding the history. And then I quickly discovered that there were like a lot of, you know, activism groups, you know, in the community of disabled New Yorkers, which is, I believe, like the largest minority in the city of New York, numbering almost 1 million. And so there's a lot of like groups who have like lawsuits with the transit agency. And one of them is Hsieh, who you mentioned, who in 2009 on his walk to work in Central Park, a tree trunk fell on his head and he had like a massive head trauma and miraculously survived. And I met him, you know, I just went on, I think it was like on 43rd Street or something and 9th Avenue. He co-founded a group called the Elevator Action Group at this larger organization called Rise and Resist. And so I went to one of these meetings, and, you know, I think they were stamping postcards to send to the then governor's office. Then it was Andrew Cuomo up in Albany. And so I started meeting him, and, you know, I really wanted to tell his story fundamentally because it's, you know, kind of a really crazy story that he was just walking to work one day and then his life just changed like that. But then most importantly is that he became, you know, me and my team, we joke, we call him the poster boy of the movement because he is like a really tenacious activist. You know, he writes op-eds for the New York Times. He's been on like Vice, and he's very eloquent. And interestingly, he actually works for Google with Google Maps. So the whole question of getting around and mobility for him became very personal as a person with a disability. So for him, I was really drawn to his eloquence, to his charisma, and to his tenaciousness. And that the word tenaciousness is something that really drew me to all these different characters, because they were all involved in the thick of just changing the status quo, showing up, rain or shine, to court hearings, rallies, and all of that. You know, they're all makers of change, people who are involved in this, you know, trying to change the system to, you know, accommodate people like them. But at the end of the day, which is the thing that really drew me to the project, is that accessibility is about universality, right? You know, you make a space inclusive and accessible for an individual with a wheelchair or someone who's, you know, has low visibility or what it may be. You're benefiting them directly, but you're also benefiting all of us able-bodied people like Miss Goodson, who did not have a disability, but, you know, would have benefited from one.
Yeah. You know, I wanted to ask Rongfei, people are going to really wonder, how did you make your film? Because it looks to me like there's a real supermarket that you're filming in. There's all kinds of product all over the place. Were you able to shoot to film inside of a real one, or did you have to build a lot of things?
Yeah, it's a real supermarket. It's in Carrefour, and the worst memory is that because it's a real market, so we have to film after it closed. So it's 4 consecutive night shooting, which kills me, and I don't want to do it one more time. If I had the chance to choose, I'd probably just maybe build up, because all of the dancers and all of the crew members are really exhausted. every day like we shoot from 10 and to the other day like 7 before it opens. So it's a nightmare for me. Yeah, and I feel very lucky because they also provide the place for free. So they just kind of like sponsor this thing. But it's funny because when I did the first scout the location in the market, and was my dancer, and he just danced. He's so like enthusiastic for him because then it's come on, it's a supermarket. Let's do something. Let's break those things down. Let's make all of those like popcorns like on the table, something. So yeah, so I got very thrilled when I went to the supermarket, and I just feel, oh my gosh, I just want to dance here. So it's a great memory, but really, it's really torturing to have the 4-night shooting. Yes.
So
and there are also food, and you cannot eat.
Right, of course. Well, so as we kind of finish up, I do want to spend a good chunk of time before we end to talk about something. If you look at all these movies, I think some of the themes that emerge is pain inflicted upon people. Even though there's only the one film that deals with the pandemic directly in a very musical way, there's also the idea of isolation and alienation that we see in all these movies. And yet all of them have a sort of a hopeful look in their own unique way. And I wanted to do something actually, and I'll be very vague so we don't know what we're talking about here, but I wanted to actually just briefly mention how each one of your movies ends so we can talk about finding the way to put the full stop or the period on it. So one ends with the face of a woman who has died in an accident. One ends with a woman and a child on a boat. One ends with a girl eating candy. One ends with a woman in a bus. One ends with a bus exploding on fire. And one ends in the long hallway of a hotel that seems like it's almost an infinity hallway. With short films, kind of like short stories, every moment counts so much. So I wanted to know, in terms of the looking forward, how each one of your characters, when the film ends, is looking into the future with hope for a better life. Can we all just talk about finding the ending and how the ending shapes the film that came before it? Joe, if you want to talk about Night Bus in that way.
Oh yes, to me, I think yes, everyone was struggle in this trip, but I think the people, the character, the weak guy, the victim, sometimes they will find the right moment to become strong and to have power to change the things. So to change the situation. So in my film also, I have a pregnant wife, and then she find the right time to change her life in this trip. So I think even this is a horror film. This is very terrible situation. But the weak character, they will find out the power, their own power. Yeah. So in my ending is hope, full of the hope. Yes.
And your ending, was that in your mind kind of in the beginning? Did the ending evolve for you, or did you really know from the start that you wanted it to have this structure?
Oh no, I also make my story, make my animations. I don't have a very clear storyboard, but I will understand in the end of my film. I will figure out what is the perfect ending for this film. So I change, even maybe so I changed the end from very beginning. Yes.
And to ask the same question, you know, actually about half, or maybe more than half of these films end with the face of a woman, which I always think, God, I mean, in cinema history, that's just such a wonderful way to read someone's face. And perhaps Gustavo can start, but then I'll also ask the others who ended their film that way. If you can Gustavo, describe the ending and how important that was.
Yeah, Joe. It's funny because for me, I kind of always knew the movie would end the way it does. There was one, I remember this very clear. I was in São Paulo one day. I was reading the newspapers in the morning, and I saw a picture of a Venezuelan woman, and she was walking on the shoulder of the road and carrying a baby on her arms. And I immediately thought the baby wasn't hers, possibly because of all that happened in my family and the things I saw when I visited the refugee camps and the stories I had heard. So I put everything together, and I thought this might not be her baby. And so I knew that this would be the end of the movie. I knew that that's actually what I was looking for as I was writing the script of the movie. I was always aiming for that ending of a woman holding a baby that's not hers. But talking about the editing of the end scene, it was very difficult because I actually shot the mother of the baby stepping out the boat.
We don't see that in the film.
And we don't see that in the film.
Yeah.
So I have many versions of that scene. It was very difficult to find the right way to edit that scene because it's such a charged moment, and you don't want to give it all away to the audience. You want the audience to learn as Marta learns what happened to her. And so that was tricky to find the sweet spot of the scene in the editing room.
Well, I can tell you that I thought about it hours later. Did the mother stay or did she go? You know, and so if it had been put in front of me and explained clearly what had happened, then why would I be thinking about it?
Exactly.
You know, so I'm glad you made that choice. I think it's better for the audience. And KACHUU also finishes with a wonderful face of this actress. Can you take us through that? And also, you know, you could have gone in many different ways with how you wanted to finish this, but there is hope. There's hope for her, at least.
Yeah, I wanted to find an ending who gives a little bit of hope, but it's also a moment. It's clear that her journey is not over on this point. So there are a lot of things she has to deal with. Her family is not talking to her anymore. The man is searching her. She can go back to the city and try to find her way. But I don't want to tell the story with a clear ending, maybe a happy ending, because it's based on these true stories of all these women, and it's an individual. So some women got a happy end and some not. And I don't want to finish the story, and hopefully the audience is thinking about what happens to these girls afterwards when she finds a way to run away, or maybe she has to go back. There's so many stories of women, and I don't want to put the end in one direction.
Yeah, it's like I just said about Gustavo, it's complex, but it's also it leaves us thinking a lot about the future, which is the whole point. And for Zamarin, it's just the simple act of one person saying thank you to somebody else. very touching, but very simple. I mean, deceptively, because it's not really simple, but kind of similar question to you. Did how the film finished, was that always in your mind as something that you were building to?
Yes, I actually started with the last scene. I've rewritten it a lot. Like there was much more sentences until in the end I just realized it just needs to be a thank you. But the scene was the first scene of the whole script I wrote, and the journey led from there to the end. So for me it was pretty clear that I actually wanted to end the movie like this. With a father and a daughter after something really bad happened to them, and the father betrayed the daughter, and she knows but needs to understand why. How does one apologize without saying sorry? Because I feel in life when really bad things happen to you, or like an experience you can't deal with, or you did something bad to someone, sometimes it's easier to say sorry with a gesture rather than really actually looking at her and saying sorry. And in my family, it was always like this. Especially in Afghan culture, saying sorry is very hard to say for people. So they do other things. They bring food, they give sweets, or they know what they like. And yeah, that's how the scene then came into like just remembering what she really liked when she was on the journey with him in the beginning. She ate that sweet, and then knowing you did something wrong and somehow you have to make up for it, but how do you apologize without really apologizing?
Yeah. And again, like we say with all these films, just paring it down to just the essence. So we don't need lots of dialogue. It can just be a couple words.
Yeah, and I wanted the audience to feel actually and to sit with them for 1.5 minutes before she turns around to her dad and accepts it with the word thank you, just as simple as that.
And if you think about 1.5 minutes is actually a lot of the running time,
yes.
Right? I mean, but that's the useful, that's how good filmmakers use the time that they have, and so, well done. Rongfei, I wanted to ask, actually, have you mentioned the name of your lead actor, who's a terrific dancer, and we get to see some of his solo dancing at the very end there. What did you want to say with the last few minutes of the movie?
Yeah, I also came up with the last scene first. I feel, and it's also like I want to express my suppression and also my loneliness during the COVID. I just want to have this one man solo dancing in the hallway, and when he walking and dancing, and because I feel because in the end the whole romantics it's all his fantasy, so the girl doesn't really exist. And then he realized it, and then he delivered the food, and he realized it. And outside of the building is the routine life, boring routine life, with people with the mask. So before he went to the real world, he still wants to dance, he still wants to use the fantasy, kind of as a rebel to this shitty world. So. That's why I really want to have this one shot of solo to express that just dance. It's so dark, and it's I want the dance to uplift myself and uplift the audience maybe in this dark time. And also I feel like musical is always captures a larger than life emotion. And I think I want to express that the fantasy, just having the fantasy, is also as important as the the meaning of life, the reality. So yeah, and so that's why I have this long hallway and he dancing. I just pretend that's me. Yeah.
Did you build that long hallway as a set, because the ceiling is very low, unless he's very tall, I don't know.
No, it's not in the. Yeah, this is a real hotel. It's
It is.
actually a hotel for quarantine later. After
Really?
I shot the film, it's a quarantine hotel. So.
Wow. Wow. And then, you know, Victor, all these films I think are really terrific as shorts, but yours, I have to admit, I did want to see more. You know, I wanted to know more and to kind of find out what's happening with these laws that we want to get passed and the legislation. So tell me about the painful decision, I guess, to finish the movie when you did.
Yeah, it's really tough because, you know, it's kind of a mixed bag because, you know, I set out to honor, you know, Malaysia Goodson. And so to have, through that, amplify the voices of the activists and advocates who are fighting to, you know, change the status quo and to make transit more equitable. But at the same time, you know, there's, you know, the film is 16 minutes, but, you know, I wanted to make it, you know, the first rough cut was almost an hour, and, you know, it was a lot of clashing of heads with my producer. He was like, let's make it 15 and, you know, let's boil it down, because it is, you know, the activism community when it comes to disabilities in New York is very vibrant. And, like, you know, you learn that it all started in the post-war when all these veterans came back from World War II and they started, you know, fighting for their rights as disabled people for, like, parking spots and all these different things. And then you learn of how accessibility impacts, you know, every aspect of life, your access to employment, to health, to, you know, all of these things. And it is a story that is ever changing with, you know, these laws that, you know, just recently the, you know, United States, the Congress passed in it a $1.5 trillion infrastructure bill, which is going to pump billions of dollars into New York Transit and other transit communities and systems in the United States. So it is an ongoing story that is changing. But so it was really tough to have to say, all right, this is it. We have to stop, because we didn't want to dump too much information on our viewers, but we wanted to fundamentally, through personal interest stories, shed light on real life situations, right? Regular people who just want to, you know, take the train to go have a drink with their friends after work, or go to a movie theater with a boyfriend and girlfriend and just enjoy the fruits of a metropolitan area like New York. But I knew that the movie had to end where it did, with the picture of Malaysia, because I made the movie to honor her. And in the process of making the film, to meet her family, to have them involved, was such a humbling experience and really fulfilling. So I really wanted to, in all that chaos of the activism, the laws, the frustration and the victories and the defeats, to bring it back to, you know, bring it back home to why I made this film, and to kind of make people remember that accessibility is about universality. This young woman was 22 years old and she died because the station she was using did not have an elevator. And that's her story. But through her story, we touch on all of these other people who are all part of the same message. So it was really tough, Joe, really tough. But, you know, that's part of the business. You know, you gotta.
And also, I think this is a great way to end, because this is a sort of a celebration as well of the short format. These are not features, but that doesn't matter. They're so complex. They're so subtle. They're so important. So in that way, I know it's painful for everybody to edit your films, but there is a real audience for these, as you know, of course, and this should be a celebration of 6 extraordinary films, extraordinary filmmakers. I want to thank all of you. Congratulations on your movies, and thank you for being here. Thank everybody else for joining us today, and be sure to take advantage of our free trial to Wrap Pro and be the first to know about Wrap screenings and events. You can also catch up on any past screenings you may have missed, or register for future ones, and a lot more by visiting TheWrap.com and going to the screening tab. So once again, thank you everybody so much for joining us today. Really appreciate it.